Tuesday's training camp session for the Saints had some good news and some bad news. Oddly enough, both involving Ohio State players. Chris Olave, Chase Young will get right into it here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvoglu, and as always, we're brought to you by Scott Fickner, Injury Lawyers, and by Crystal. If you guys like the content we're putting out during training camp and also leading up into the regular season, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Boot Crew Media's YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate it. So do you want the good news or the bad news first? Let's start off with the bad news because I like to save the good news for end. So I'm sorry I even asked you that. I didn't give you much of a choice, but we're going to start off with the bad news. This Tuesday, Chris Olave left practice early with a hip injury, which no one wants to hear that because if you're going to put a list of 5 players you're excited to watch this season for the Saints, I'd have to imagine Chris Olave will be on that list after a really encouraging start to his career with the first 2 seasons in New Orleans, and the fact that he is now the unquestioned number 1 wide receiver. You want to see him out there. You want to see him do his thing. But unfortunately, we'll probably have to wait a little bit. Doesn't mean we'll have to wait into the regular season or whatnot, but maybe a couple of days, we'll see what happens. So all we know right now is during practice, he fell on his hip. When asked about it, Dennis Allen said, and I quote, "I think he just landed on his hip. It's his hip, and that's all I really got right now." So a vague injury update. There's nothing really there that you can pull out from. I wouldn't suggest that people just start, slapping the panic button like a lunatic, but it is obviously concerning that the Saints have now had their third important player get injured so far. Marshawn Lattimore with a hip injury. Ironically enough, that's 2 hip injuries now. Brian Brzee with the foot injury, and now Chris Olave with a hip injury of his own. So that part's not ideal, and I understand that, and I can totally understand if people decide to start going crazy and saying the Saints are doomed. I'm not going to do that yet. This is training camp. It is July 30th, but obviously you don't want him to get hurt. There's so much of this offense that is going to lean on him. So hopefully Chris Olave makes a full recovery and we get a better update from Dennis Allen later this week. I don't understand why he didn't put everything out there right now, but that's all we got when it comes to Chris Olave. Hip injury, fell on it. We'll go from there. Hopefully we get an update in the coming days. As for the good news, because I did say I'd give you the bad news, and then I'll go to the good news. The good news, I think it's much more intriguing, not just because it's positive. I'm trying to keep the vibes up on this Tuesday. Chase Young, second day in a row where this man looked like an absolute menace at practice. Had a sack, blew up 2 other plays during the team portion of it. He looks like the real deal. And again, there is that beware to go all in training camp. But you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to say it. I'm all in on this Chase Young hype train. I think that he can be the guy for the Saints defensive line from a pass rushing perspective, from a talent standpoint. He can be that anchor for them. And I said it in a recent video, which actually came out yesterday. The age is there. He's only 25. We know the talent is there. He's a former defensive rookie of the year, former number 2 pick, former stud at Ohio State. We know that the motivation will be there. He's on a 1-year deal. If it doesn't work out with the Saints, he's probably going to get another 1-year deal and hope that that pans out. But if he balls out this season, he will get paid, whether it's from the Saints, whether it's from another team, whoever it may be. Someone is going to come up to his desk, give him a blank check, say, fill out these numbers. What do you want? There's your ask, whatever your asking price is, we'll meet that. So the motivation is there. The mentorship is there. He's learned a lot from Cam Jordan, even in a brief amount of time. And remember, when he signed with the Saints, he talked about playing with a guy like Cam Jordan, who, at this stage in his career is no longer an elite player. But Cam Jordan, for years, arguably a decade, was an elite player. So you have the mentorship aspect there. A defensive coach who knows how to get the best out of his players. Dennis Allen does that. And again, I rip on Dennis Allen probably more than the average human being ever should. I blame him for everything. If I stub my toe, I'm going to blame him. But in this particular example, when it comes to coaching defensive players, Dennis Allen knows how to do that. So there's so much around Chase Young, so many reasons to say he has to perform this year or why he will perform this year, that I'm all in. So when he comes out here and he has another dominant day of practice and the neck injury looks pretty healed and you feel like this man is playing up to his potential, granted it's just practice, how can you not be excited? And I'm saying this not just because I think Chase Young is a good football player and could become a great football player, but I'm also saying this because, man, the Saints need him to be great. And I know this defense has playmakers. I know DeMario is a stud. I know Lattimore is a stud. I know Tyrann Mathieu still a very good football player. I know Paulson Adebo is another good year away from getting a monstrous contract. But when I look at this Saints defensive line, when I look at the pass rushers, it's Carl Granderson and a lot of question marks. Chase Young can absolutely obliterate those concerns if he plays like the Chase Young we know he can be. So that's all I'll leave you with. But while there is concern about Chris Olave's hip injury, if you're going to be optimistic about something this summer, and us Saints fans have not had a lot to be optimistic about. There were not a lot of moves in free agency. The draft was good, not great in terms of excitement. This is the player. This is the one that if you're going to get all excited about and you're going to say you're on the hype train, which, by the way, I've already purchased my damn ticket for it. This is the guy. And now we just got to hope he stays healthy and we hope he produces like he can. So that's going to wrap it up, guys, for this edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. As always, I ask you to share your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you think Chase Young is going to break out this year? If so, what's your production numbers for him? As for Chris Olave, are you concerned? Are you not losing any sleep over it? I hope that's the case. Don't lose sleep over this team, I promise you, especially in July. But let me know in the comment section below. And as always, I'll get back to you. Well, more content here in the upcoming days on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.